Ted Bundy, a comprehensive criminological analysis.
Introduction. Understanding the Unthinkable Brewery. Theodore Robert Bundy stands as one of the most studied figures in American criminal history, not because his crimes deserve celebration, but because understanding how such profound evil manifests in an outwardly normal individual remains crucial to preventing future tragedies. Between 1974 and 1978, Bundy kidnapped, raped, and murdered dozens of young women and girls, ultimately confessing to 30 murders, though experts believe the actual count may be significantly higher. What makes the Bundy case particularly significant for criminological study is not the brutality of his crimes alone, but rather the stark contrast between his public persona and his private actions. Despite the appalling nature of his crimes, Bundy became something of a celebrity, capturing attention for his charm and intelligence. This dissonance between appearance and reality exposed critical gaps in society's ability to identify dangerous individuals and revealed profound weaknesses in law enforcement coordination that would ultimately reshape American criminal justice. This analysis examines the Ted Bundy case through multiple lenses: the criminological methods he employed, the psychological profile that enabled such deception, the investigative breakthroughs that brought him to justice, the lives of those he destroyed, and the lasting impact his crimes had on law enforcement practices, forensic science, and victim advocacy. The crimes, pattern, and methodology. Suppressed of terror, flooring. By 1974, Ted Bundy's prolific reign of terror and murder was underway. His confirmed killing spree spanned multiple states, including Washington, Oregon, Utah, Idaho, Colorado, and Florida. The following is a timeline of Bundy's confirmed brutal crimes, his 2 escapes from police custody, and how he was brought to justice in Florida. The attacks began in Washington state in early 1974. The first of Ted Bundy's victims is widely believed to be 18-year-old Karen Sparks. Also known as Joni Lentz in Bundy literature, the UW student was attacked in her sleep on January 4, 1974. She survived, but suffered permanent brain damage. 1 month later, he broke into the apartment of Linda Ann Healy, another University of Washington student, beat her, and then abducted her. Her remains were later found at a Taylor Mountain site, where Bundy left multiple victims. Throughout 1974, young women continued to disappear from college campuses in the Pacific Northwest. The pattern was unmistakable, yet law enforcement struggled to connect the cases across jurisdictions. Paperback. Calculated deception. Jaume Bundy's modus operandi evolved in organization and sophistication over time, as is typical of serial killers, according to FBI experts. His approach demonstrated meticulous planning and psychological manipulation. He would employ various ruses designed to lure his victim to the vicinity of his vehicle, where he had pre-positioned a weapon, usually a crowbar. In many cases, he wore a plaster cast on one leg or a sling on one arm, and sometimes hobbled on crutches, then requested assistance in carrying something to his vehicle. This tactic exploited the natural empathy of his victims, a particularly cruel manipulation. Bundy was regarded as handsome and charismatic, traits he exploited to win the confidence of his victims and the people around him in his daily life. His ability to appear trustworthy and non-threatening allowed him to operate in plain sight, often in crowded public spaces like college campuses, beaches, and parks. Bundy was an unusually organized and calculating criminal who used his extensive knowledge of law enforcement methodologies to elude identification and capture for years. He deliberately avoided firearms due to the noise and ballistic evidence, instead using blunt trauma and strangulation. Bundy's fingerprints were never found at a crime scene, nor any other incontrovertible evidence of his guilt, demonstrating his understanding of forensic science. The geographic spread. When young women began disappearing in Washington, Bundy moved to Utah to attend law school, and the murders continued in Utah, Idaho, and Colorado. This interstate movement created significant challenges for law enforcement agencies, that were not yet equipped to share information effectively across jurisdictions. Withdrawing his escapes from custody in Colorado, Bundy entered the Chi Omega sorority house near Florida State University and killed Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy on January 15, 1978. He also attacked Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler, who survived. Shortly after the Chi Omega attacks, Bundy broke into the apartment of Cheryl Thomas and attacked her. His final victim was 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, who was kidnapped and murdered on February 9, 1978. The investigation, breaking the pattern. Preferable, enriched challenges and coordination failures. The investigation into Bundy's crimes revealed critical weaknesses in 1970s law enforcement infrastructure. The Bundy case is a classic 1970s investigative failure. No centralized database like VICAP, introduced only in 1985, partly because of this case. The FBI got involved late and only on request. States didn't share information. Condemned Demecrivs drowned in thousands of tips. VW Beetle owner lists ran into the thousands. TEDs from witness reports, vague composite sketches. Notes were scribbled on scraps of paper with no standards. Without proper computer systems to track patterns across state lines, Bundy exploited the chaos. He didn't fit the monster stereotype, no criminal record, social, convincing. Cops ignored suspicions because he seemed like one of them. Confronted, a routine traffic stop, federally. Bundy's first arrest came not from brilliant detective work, but from a routine encounter. In August 1975, police arrested Bundy for the first time after pulling him over in his Volkswagen and finding suspicious items, including handcuffs, rope, and a ski mask. Bundy flashed a law student ID, but his story fell apart. The passenger seat had been removed and placed in the back, convenient for transporting bodies. A search revealed a killer's kit: ski mask, a mask made of pantyhose, crowbar, handcuffs, ice pick, rope, wire, trash bags. Detective Jerry Thompson recognized Bundy's name from tips provided by Elizabeth Klupfer, Bundy's former girlfriend. Elizabeth called police 3 times, in August 1974 in Seattle, in September at the King County Sheriff's Office, in November after the abduction of Carol DeRonch in Utah. Initially, police dismissed her concerns, but now the pieces began connecting. Carol DeRonch, who had survived an attempted abduction, immediately identified him as Officer Roseland in a lineup. Bundy was convicted of kidnapping in 1976 and sentenced to prison in Utah. The escapes. Conserve. Bundy's intelligence and audacity were demonstrated through 2 dramatic escapes. In 1976, Bundy was charged with killing a vacationing nursing student, and he found himself in Aspen, Colorado, in June 1977 for a preliminary hearing. Left alone at one point, Bundy let himself out of a second-story window, jogged down Main Street, and disappeared. He was recaptured after 6 days. His second escape was more elaborate. On New Year's Eve in 1977, slipping through an opening in the ceiling of his cell and sneaking out through the jailer's office, Bundy made his way to Florida, where he would commit his final, most brutal attacks. Polling, and February 15, 1978. Bundy was arrested in Pensacola, Florida, by local police after he was stopped for speeding while driving a stolen vehicle. Initially, he refused to identify himself, but eventually his true identity was revealed. The evidence linking Bundy to the Chi Omega murders was compelling. Investigator Frisbee located a ski mask that Bundy had worn. It was later determined that it contained Bundy's hair. This evidence was critical later in the trial. Perhaps most damning was the bite mark evidence. The bite mark evidence was a pivotal moment in Ted Bundy's case, playing a crucial role in linking him to several of his murders. In 1978, forensic experts were able to match Bundy's dental impressions to bite marks found on the bodies of Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman. The victims, remembering those lost, honoring their lives. Behind every statistic and case file number was a real person with dreams, families, and futures stolen from them. It is crucial to remember that Bundy's crimes were not abstract. They shattered families and communities across multiple states. The youngest confirmed victim was 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, a junior high school student who disappeared in the middle of the school day. Others included college students pursuing their education. Linda Ann Healy, who was known in the community for giving the weekday ski report on the radio. George Ann Hawkins, a University of Washington student, and many others whose bodies were discovered months or years later, if at all. Omega attacks shocked the nation. Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy were killed, and Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler sustained serious injuries. These young women had their lives interrupted in what should have been a safe environment, their own sorority house. The survivors' courage. Several women survived Bundy's attacks, and their testimony proved crucial. Carol Duranch escaped after Bundy attempted to abduct her in Utah. Karen Chandler, Kathy Kleiner, and Cheryl Thomas all survived the Florida attacks, though they suffered severe physical and psychological trauma. Kathy Kleiner said, "I feel that because I survived Ted Bundy and there were so many victims that didn't, I don't want to take that opportunity I was given and not do good with it. I want to be sure that I keep going for them." Their resilience in testifying at trial, despite the trauma, demonstrated extraordinary courage. Karen Chandler said, "It was just my mission to tell my story." The psychological profile, understanding the mind. Clinical diagnoses. Colonization. Forensic psychologists who examined Bundy reached various conclusions about his mental state. According to Whittaker's research, Bundy had the following traits: antagonism, deceptive, manipulative, callous, exploitative, and arrogant. Forensic psychologists who studied Bundy concluded that he exhibited high levels of psychopathy, which was measured using Hare's Psychopathy Checklist Revised, PCL-R. Psychopathy is characterized by a lack of empathy, superficial charm, manipulative behavior, and an absence of remorse. All traits Bundy demonstrated consistently. Pridem Whittaker has come to the conclusion there are successful psychopaths, people who have the core characteristics of a psychopath, yet somehow manage to succeed in exploiting others while avoiding punishment. I would consider Ted to be a successful psychopath because of his traits of high rather than low conscientiousness. The mask of sanity. According to Thomas Whittaker, Bundy was, for the most part, emotionally stable. A trait common to all psychopaths is the ability to be deceptive, to lie with ease. The classic phrase in psychopathy literature is that they wear a mask of sanity. A normal, even charming facade, while harboring violent impulses, is what made Bundy so dangerous and difficult to detect. Bundy's psychological profile, characterized by psychopathy, narcissism, and a compulsive need for control, provides a disturbing yet fascinating look into the mind of a serial killer. Control and possession. FBI Special Agent William Hagmaier, who interviewed Bundy extensively, gained insight into his motivations. Hagmaier was struck by the deep, almost mystical satisfaction that Bundy took in murder. He said that after a while, murder is not just a crime of lust or violence, it becomes possession. They are part of you. The victim becomes a part of you, and you two are forever one. This need for absolute control extended beyond the act of murder itself. Bundy told Hagmaier that he revisited Taylor Mountain, Issaquah, and other secondary crime scenes, often several times, to lie with his victims and perform sexual acts with their bodies until putrefaction forced him to stop. Nature versus nurture. Bundy's early life showed some warning signs, though they were not sufficient to predict his future crimes. He grew up believing he lived with his older sister, Louise Cowell, and his parents, but Louise was his mother, and Ted's parents were actually his grandparents. This family deception and the mystery surrounding his biological father's identity created psychological complexities. Bundy had an unstable childhood and was raised believing his biological mother was his sister. He reportedly showed early signs of antisocial behavior, including cruelty to animals. However, his professors held him in high regard, and he worked for a while at Seattle's Suicide Hotline Crisis Center. In 1972, Bundy earned a degree in psychology before getting accepted into law school in Utah. This combination of intelligence, social skills, and hidden pathology created a dangerous predator who could move through society undetected. The trials, justice in the courtroom. Blackmail. The Chi Omega trial. 1978, a Florida grand jury indicted Bundy on charges of first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, and burglary for the Chi Omega killings and assaults. He stood trial in June 1979 in the Florida Circuit Court for Dade County, with Judge Edward Cowart presiding. The trial was covered by 250 reporters from 5 continents and was the first to be televised nationally in the United States. This unprecedented media coverage transformed the trial into a national spectacle, with Bundy often playing to the cameras. Despite the presence of 5 court-appointed attorneys, Bundy again handled much of his own defense. His decision to represent himself was seen by many as an attempt to control the narrative and maintain his grandiose self-image. Prerequisite. The evidence. Freight presented multiple forms of evidence. Nita Neary, a member of Chi Omega, who was returning to the sorority house the night of the attacks, also had reported seeing a man come down the stairs and exit the front door. In court, when asked to identify the man she saw, Nita Neary pointed him out. Blindness included eyewitness testimonies, bite mark analysis that matched Bundy's dental impressions to the wounds on Lisa Levy, and fibers linking Bundy to the crime scene. Sheriff Ken Katsaris said, "The search warrant for his mouth probably was the first in the nation's history." The bite mark evidence proved revolutionary in forensic science, though its reliability has since been questioned by some experts. Psychologist and sentencing. The jury found Bundy guilty on July 24, 1979. He was sentenced to death for the murders of Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman. When Judge Cowart pronounced the sentence, he made the now famous statement that would later inspire a Netflix film title. Extremely wicked, shockingly evil, and vile. The Leach Trial. The trial for Kimberly Leach's murder began in January 1980. The prosecution presented a strong case, including fiber evidence, eyewitness testimonies, and physical evidence linking Bundy to the crime. In a bizarre moment, Bundy proposed to his girlfriend, Carol Ann Boone, in the courtroom while she was on the witness stand. Boone accepted, and under Florida law, the declaration constituted a legal marriage. Bundy was found guilty of Kimberly Leach's murder and sentenced to death once again on February 10, 1980. This marked his 3rd death sentence. The final confessions and execution. Last-ditch manipulations. As his execution date approached, Bundy attempted a final manipulation he called his bones for time strategy. On January 20th and 22nd, 1989, Ted Bundy sat down with King County Detective Robert Keppel to give his final confessions. As a gesture of good faith, and with the hope of receiving a stay in exchange for more information on the final resting place of his unrecovered victims, Bundy began providing details about murders. Polly Nelson, Bundy's post-conviction lawyer, revealed that Ted always thought that his knowledge of these crimes was his ace in the hole, but by offering to confess, the governor would delay his execution a few years. Reinforced, some believe these confessions were intentionally misleading. Ann Rule, the author of The Stranger Beside Me, told a Utah State University audience that she believed Bundy gave Utah police false information about where he buried victims, and that she believed his confession to them was a scheme to send police out slopping through the mud in vain, something Ted would enjoy. The execution. Denial, a firm execution date of January 24, 1989, was announced. Bundy's journey through the appeals courts had been unusually rapid for a capital murder case. On the eve of his execution, he talked of suicide. He did not want to give the state the satisfaction of watching him die, Hagmaier said. Bundy rejected his last meal and was executed in the Rayford electric chair at 7:16 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on January 24, 1989. When asked if he had anything to say before the executioner flipped the switch, Bundy uttered his final sentence. "I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends." Even in his final moments, Bundy maintained his carefully constructed image. Brianna Fox, a University of South Florida criminology professor and former FBI agent, said, "Psychopaths, one of the things that they're known for is just being very superficial. I think Ted wanted to keep up this image that he had a family that loved him, that he had friends that cared for him." Impact on law enforcement and criminal justice. Systemic changes. Bundy's crimes exposed critical gaps in law enforcement coordination and led to significant reforms. Bundy's ability to evade capture by crossing jurisdictions exposed critical weaknesses in interstate communication and cooperation among police departments, prosecutors, and investigative units. His case underscored the urgent need for better coordination between law enforcement agencies nationwide. Ted Bundy's crimes contributed to the development of the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, VICAP, launched in 1985. VICAP created a centralized system to track and analyze violent crimes, particularly homicides, sexual assaults, and missing persons cases with suspected foul play. Forensic advances. The Bundy case accelerated the use of forensic evidence in criminal investigations. The Chi Omega trial helped establish bite mark analysis as an important tool in criminal investigations. Although the use of bite mark evidence has since been called into question by some experts, it played a crucial role in Bundy's conviction. Criminal profiling. Presumption. The synopsis was pulled from a psychological assessment of Ted Bundy prepared by two FBI agents, Howard Tetton and Robert Ressler, at the Bureau's training academy. The two men were part of a groundbreaking behavioral analysis unit set up 5 years earlier for precisely this purpose: to study the behavior, experiences, and psychological makeup of criminals and suspects for patterns and insights. Google Schools provided the FBI with invaluable insights into the mind of a serial killer. His behavior helped shape modern criminal profiling techniques, which are now widely used to identify and apprehend serial offenders. Victims' rights movement. Cartridges. Ted Bundy's crimes helped spark the victims' rights movement in the US. His victims were predominantly young women, many of them college students, which exposed how easily predators could exploit gaps in public safety and community awareness. Negligence demand grew for more proactive measures to prevent gender-based violence, leading to the rise of campus safety programs, self-defense education, and victim assistance initiatives. Bundy's case also underscored the need for more respectful and compassionate treatment of victims and their families within the justice system. Lessons learned. Prevention and recognition. Understanding the warning signs. Migrated. While not every individual displaying concerning behavior will become violent, Bundy's case revealed patterns that mental health professionals and law enforcement now recognize as potential indicators of dangerous pathology. 1. Theory. Man of normalcy. Psychopaths can successfully hide their true nature behind charm and intelligence. Surface-level social skills should not be mistaken for genuine empathy or emotional connection. 2. Sexcalation patterns. Bundy told Hagmaier that he considered himself to be an amateur, an impulsive killer in his early years, before moving into what he termed his prime or predator phase. This pattern of escalation is common in serial offenders. 3. Geographic mobility. The ability to commit crimes across multiple jurisdictions while maintaining a conventional lifestyle created significant investigative challenges that required systemic solutions. The importance of believing victims and witnesses. Elizabeth Klupfer's repeated attempts to alert police to Bundy were initially dismissed. Carol Durant's survival and testimony proved crucial to his eventual conviction. These cases underscore the critical importance of taking victim and witness reports seriously, even when the suspect seems unlikely. Media responsibility. Lifelong. The intense media coverage of Bundy's trials created a problematic dynamic where his charm and intelligence sometimes overshadowed the horror of his crimes. This phenomenon, where serial killers become celebrities, raises important questions about media responsibility and public fascination with violence. The sensationalization of criminal cases can inadvertently shift focus from victims to perpetrators, turning murderers into anti-heroes. Modern coverage must balance public interest with respect for victims and awareness of copycat effects. Conclusion: a cautionary tale for society. Ted Bundy's case serves as a profound reminder that evil does not always announce itself in obvious ways. His ability to move through society as a law student, crisis hotline volunteer, and political worker, while simultaneously committing horrific crimes, challenged fundamental assumptions about what dangerous individuals look like. The systemic changes his crimes prompted, from VICAP to improved forensic techniques to enhanced victim advocacy, represent attempts to prevent future tragedies. Yet the case also reveals the limits of prediction and prevention. Bundy's intelligence, charm, and understanding of both psychology and law made him exceptionally difficult to identify and capture. Biographer Anne Rule characterized Bundy as a sadistic sociopath who took pleasure from another human's pain and the control he had over his victims to the point of death and even after. His own self-assessment was equally chilling. He once described himself as the most cold-hearted son of a bitch you'll ever meet. The true legacy of the Ted Bundy case should not be his celebrity or the dark fascination he continues to generate. Instead, it should be measured in the improvements to law enforcement coordination, forensic science, criminal profiling, and victim advocacy that emerged from these tragedies. Most importantly, it should be found in the courage of survivors like Carol Durant, Karen Chandler, Kathy Kleiner, and Cheryl Thomas, and in our collective commitment to remembering the names and lives of those who were lost. Linda Ann Healy, Donna Gail Manson, Susan Rancourt, Roberta Parks, Brenda Ball, Georgianne Hawkins, Janice Ott, Denise Nasland, Nancy Wilcox, Melissa Smith, Laura Amy, Deborah Kent, Karen Campbell, Julie Cunningham, Denise Oliverson, Lynette Culver, Susan Curtis, Margaret Bowman, Lisa Levy, and Kimberly Leach, among others whose deaths may never be fully accounted for. Their lives mattered, their potential was stolen, and the lessons learned from their tragic deaths continue to shape efforts to protect others from similar fates.